Like it's 1 minute past the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being here today, joining us for the Assembly of Osteopathic Graduate Medical Educators webinar series. We're pleased to have you join us for this Academic Careers Series webinar on From Struggle to Strategy, Advancing Scholarly Activity in Your Residency Program. My name is Katina Rue. I'm the chair of the AOGME Education Committee, and I'm going to be helping facilitate this webinar today. And before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the AOGME webpage within 7 calendar days. All of the webinar participants are in listen-only mode, and if you have any technical issues, please use the chat and we will assist you with that. If you have any questions for the presenters during the webinar, go to the bottom of the screen and you can submit your questions through the Q&A feature at any time. Hopefully, we'll have a few minutes at the end to respond to your questions. And I'm also excited to announce that osteopathic physicians can earn up to 1 hour of AOA Category 1A CME credit for attending this live webinar. Make sure you complete the post-webinar evaluation survey and email aogme@acom.org to be sent the CME attestation form. And now I will briefly introduce our presenters. Dr. Kim Stutzman grew up in northern Michigan and trained at the University of Michigan School of Medicine. She completed her residency at Family Medicine Spokane. After a year at the University of Washington as a fourth-year chief resident, she settled in White Salmon, Washington, in a rural small practice. After 12 years of wonderful, broad-spectrum, rural, community-based care, she moved to Boise in 2007 to pursue teaching at the residency program. She's the inaugural director of the Full Circle Health NAMPA Family Medicine Residency Program, which opened 7 years ago. She has special interest areas in geriatrics, medical student teaching, and training the next generation of rural family doctors. Dr. Sarah Cole is a graduate of ATSU Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine and completed her osteopathic internship at Illinois Masonic Medical Center and her family medicine residency at Mercy Hospital, St. Louis, where she's currently the program director. She is the immediate past president of the Association of Family Medicine Residency Directors and immediate past chair of the Council of Academic Family Medicine. She nerds out on graduate medical education, as evidenced by the fact that she is currently pursuing her doctorate in health professions education at ATSU College of Graduate Health Sciences. When she's not being a nerd, she enjoys going on travel adventures with her college-age daughters and husband, Matt. Thank you, Dr. Cole and Dr. Stutzman, for joining us today and sharing your expertise. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for jumping in today. I know these can always be a little bit busy in the middle of a day. So really appreciate your interest in this struggle to strategy, right? Advancing scholarly activity in your residency program. We have no disclosures, although I will say we are both from family medicine residencies, and I know that we have a broader audience than that. So we will do our best to think broadly, but recognize that we do come from the family medicine world. So today, what we're hoping is that we can really help you think about a holistic approach to a residency program scholarly activity, and to look for opportunities that may not come to mind initially when you think about the words scholarly activity. So we'll look at practice-based, curriculum-based, and community-based activity. And then we also want to explore some strategies to balance scholarly activity with clinical responsibility while we foster a culture of continuous inquiry. So we'll have some discussion about that as well. So what comes to mind when you contemplate the words scholarly activity, right? So it sounds like a very highbrow thought, right? What is scholarly activity? And certainly when I moved from rural medicine to academic medicine, this intimidated me. And this is kind of what I thought of. Like it has to be research, it has to have an IRB and funding and grants and all of this infrastructure in order to do something that is research or is scholarly activity. But I think that when we think about what is scholarship, scholarship is really taking a big concept and being able to explain it either because there's new data or because you have a specific audience that needs to hear something and understand it. And so how do we make concepts understandable? And I think when you look at that kind of approach to scholarly activity, we can make it bigger and broader than just what this word cloud would say. So why do we do this, Dr. Cole?
That is a great question, Dr. Stutzman. So while some of us perform scholarly activity because we love it, while others of us perform it, despite the barriers that we're experiencing, the bottom line is some of us only do it because we have to. So as residents and faculty in GME, the ACGME does require that we do this at all levels. So next slide, Dr. Stutzman. So I thought we might take a look at seeing what does the ACGME specifically ask faculty and residents to do. And so these are from the core requirements. And so your specialty may have some additional descriptors or requirements around scholarship, but at its core level, every program must have every resident participate in scholarship if they want to maintain accreditation. Next slide. For faculty, the core requirements do get a little more descriptive. And so they say, among the scholarly activity that faculty perform, you do have to show accomplishments in at least 3 of these 7 or 8 areas. So while it can be research in basic science, which, like Dr. Stutzman, that was sort of the first thing I thought of when I thought of research as a new career faculty, it could also be research into educational techniques, patient care, population health. It could include a peer-reviewed grant. It could include a quality improvement or patient safety initiative. It could be scholarly writing, such as systematic reviews, chapters in medical textbooks, etc. It could be an innovative educational technique. It could even be leadership. So it didn't even need to be producing something written. It could be serving time on a professional committee or on an editorial board, or again, moving on to innovations in education. And then next slide, Dr. Stutzman, thank you. As osteopathic programs, again, these are core requirements. So programs with osteopathic recognition must ensure that their learning environment supports and encourages osteopathic scholarly activity by both residents and faculty. And osteopathic faculty members collectively need to produce at least 2 osteopathic scholarly activities annually when you average that over a 5-year period, and ensure that each resident produces at least 1 osteopathic scholarly activity in the years that it takes them to graduate from the program. Next slide. And then, of course, if you are a program director on this call, this will look familiar to you because we need to report back to the ACGME what we are doing in each of these categories. So it breaks down the ACGME core requirements and asks program directors to list for each faculty in what categories are they completing this research. Next slide. It's a little simplified for the residents and fellows, but again, we get to categorize what scholarly activity they are doing and report that out in web ads. Next slide. Now, some of us, so Dr. Stutzman warned we may have a little bias towards family medicine, but I do want to sort of elevate for everybody that competency-based medical education is coming. And so different specialties are at different places along the spectrum to where their boards will also be requiring proof that learners are engaging in scholarly activities. So for example, the American Board of Family Medicine has two core outcomes, and that's really what we call our EPAs, or our entrustable professional activities, if that term seems more familiar to you. So every program must now attest that every family medicine resident who's graduating is capable of engaging in lifelong learning and capable of leading and managing and participating in teams that provide care and improve outcomes. So our boards are now going to ask us to prove through a competency eligibility model that our learners can complete scholarly activity in some form. Next slide. And so sort of tying this into what does this scholarly activity look like, the ACGME does again give us a little bit of description here, sort of summing it up by saying our scholarly activities might include those of discovery, integration, application, and teaching. And it's actually expected that each program tailors its scholarly activity towards its mission and towards the community it serves. So it is okay if different programs have scholarly activity priorities that look very different from each other. An academic program might focus on more of that classic biomedical research, while a community-based program might focus on population health or quality improvement, for example. Next slide. So if we break that down into sort of some bite-sized ways that we can think about that, some programs, if they're focusing on quality improvement, that would be something that they would do in the setting of their clinic or their hospital-based practice. And what they're looking at with that is what is the impact on daily delivery of patient care. A program that is concentrating on population health, the setting they're trying to affect really is the community. And so the impact there will be community outreach. And then other programs may focus on teaching and learning. And so that would be either curriculum-based or even leadership-based setting, and would focus on teaching and learning for residents when we're looking at the impact that would be assessed. Dr. Stutzman, anything to add on common program requirements or how you can think about operationalizing that?
Not really. I mean, I think that you've gone through what is our duty, right? And then I think we can talk about, once you get through the duty side of it, how do you have fun with this? How do you integrate it into your programs in a way that that people are excited about participation? So think about, what type of scholarly activity does your program do? What has it done in the past, and has it been successful? So we've talked about what are the common traditional types of medical knowledge and how do we share those out. So systemic reviews, case reports, we've written stuff up and submitted them to journals and get that peer back and forth and finally publish. And I will be honest that we lose people along the way in that process sometimes. We do a lot of lecture-based teaching for our residents, and we'll talk about some ways to maybe expand on that and put the fun into that space. But these novel ideas, looking at community-based education, looking at, how do residents take information that maybe they've done a lecture-based teaching on, colon cancer screening, for instance, like here's all the different methods and here's how we've implemented it in our clinic. And maybe that's part of now a QI process. And maybe that's a lecture given to one of the community organizations to help our population, our people, understand what's the value of colon cancer screening. Looking at innovative teaching styles. And I'll be honest, until I was putting this together, I didn't know gamification was an actual word. But how do you turn a lecture that could be rather dry, i.e. thyroid disease, and turn it into Jeopardy or some other kind of game that pulls your learners in? That's an innovative teaching style. How do we use simulation in our education? And if we study how that works and how that worked for your population of learners, well, gosh golly, that's a research project. Looking at leadership training, as Sarah, Dr. Cole spoke to, and then value-based care. If we look at a whole population and we are trying to change the dial for a community, what works? And then how do we report that out so other similar communities can learn from that? Quality process-based improvement, we all are doing that every day. We're doing that work. How do you turn that work that you're already doing into a scholarly activity? So we're going to talk about some cases to make that happen. So when we think about that, now here's an example with quality improvement. So your sponsoring institution said you have a new quality metric. You need to increase screening for suicidal ideation in your pediatric population. This happened to us 2 years ago. And our clinic baseline scores were below average. And so how do you fix that? Well, get a group of residents and faculty, maybe add your behavioral health team if you're lucky enough to have them, and prioritize some ideas, come up with some plans, and then that core team of folks tracks. Did it work? How did the improvement look over time? Maybe you've got a run chart of the number of suicidal ideation screening that has been done, and then that core team includes a resident, and now the resident reports back to the sponsoring institution at what progress your community of clinicians made. That resident now has done scholarly activity involved in quality improvement. And if they really want to up the dial, they can create a poster that demonstrates that run chart and the experiences and the group and who was in it. And that poster could be presented at a whole plethora of opportunities. Many of our state medical associations have local meetings where they will accept resident presentations. Great. The work needed to be done, it got done, and now you're using it to fuel your scholarly activity. Another example is population health. A local high school teacher requests help in teaching about healthcare careers, that pipeline that we're all wanting to make bigger. And so great, let's partner with this high school teacher. And that could be a one-off. You go and you talk to the students, but maybe you want to do a little bit more. So the resident partners with a faculty member, you design a workshop on suture repair or laceration repair, or suturing to do laceration repair, joint injections, point of care ultrasound, and the residents create a facilitator's guide for the next year to come and do that. That is an academic scholarly project. But then maybe they take it one step further and they write an article for the local paper saying, hey, we did this cool thing, and here's some ways that if you are interested in a healthcare career, you could get access to more information about how to go into a healthcare career. And so one simple question, one email from a science teacher now has had 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of scholarly activity for your program. And then teaching and learning, right? So I don't know about y'all, but I'm doing my annual faculty reviews right now and going through like, so Bob, how was your scholarly activity this year? And the response is, well, I don't like doing research. I just want to see patients and help residents learn OMT. Well, that's great. We all love Bob, and he's a great teacher. But we all need some scholarly time. So maybe Bob could work with OMT procedural training modules. And maybe Bob could then partner with a resident and complete some pre and post assessment before and after work with these OMT modules. And then maybe, just maybe, Bob could look at what our programs graduates have done with OMT. Who's doing OMT? And once we've implemented these modules, do the number of graduates who are actually utilizing OMT in their clinic, does that go up, right? So looking at some outcomes measures for your residency, that would be cool. And so I think that's another opportunity to turn this, I don't do that, into something that Bob is excited about doing, because that would be fun, right? And I appreciate all of you who asked questions before this webinar got started. And I love the, yeah, sure, scholarly activity, how and when, right? And most of us have some ideas about how, and hopefully are getting some new ideas about how, but the when is really tough. So how do we make this real? How do you bake it into your program? Well, time is a critical factor for all of us. We put in our program, we have a half day of community and community medicine and scholarly activity built into every 4 weeks for each resident. Some of them are really into community medicine and they tend to do more community than they do scholarly work. And then we remind them in their 3rd year that they can utilize the work that they've done in their community projects to generate scholarly activity. And we require all of them to create a poster by the time they graduate. So we've really baked some form of scholarly activity into the curriculum. I've also given options for that, right? So you can do a research elective block, or I think more effectively, a longitudinal research elective, where you're taking a day here and a day there, and we have specific criteria of how and when residents can do that, that really could allow them to work in a project over a 3-year period. But all of this takes care and feeding. And so you have to have adequate administrative time for faculty. And I know that those are fighting words in a lot of places because it's really hard to get adequate administrative time. But I think if you can demonstrate that what the faculty is working on is not just specifically for your residents and your learners, but also helps improve the care that our patients are getting. So I know that many of us are in situations where the care of patients is really pushing our time. I think when you can spin the administrative time in that you're not just helping scholarly activity, you're also helping patient care, really helps sponsoring institutions understand the need for time. We also are looking for a lot of resources. Like, where are your resources? Do you have a really robust QI team? Do you have a really robust interprofessional team? So your behavioral health and pharmacy team, are they awesome and wanting to help residents get access to scholarly work? Where is your administrative support? Do you have a statistician? Do you have a university nearby? Maybe not that you're affiliated with. I did a qualitative research project, which was wonderful and tons of fun. But I could even code it, learned how to do that. But there's no way I had time to write it up. And so I worked with one of our local universities that doesn't have a med school, but they do have a health professions program, and their health professions program folks helped me write it up. So there's partnerships in weird spaces that you may not think of as your traditional go-to. It's also super helpful to have champions. We have a scholarly activity faculty hero. That's what I call her, but she has done so many things to help make this work for us. We talked about the culture of inquiry, and I think asking that, being part of the, hey, with just a little bit more work, you could turn this into something, is really that lift that people need. That's why I call her a hero, because she does that lift. And I think all of us look for your hero to help create that culture of inquiry. And one of the best ways to create that culture is to celebrate successes. So we have a long list of scholarly activity that our residents and faculty have done, and we prominently display it on our webpage. Because we want people coming into our program to know that that's an expectation, and we want people to feel excited about the work that they've done. So
So
Sarah,
the other, yes.
how do you know what your program is actually doing? How do you keep track of it?
Absolutely. So the other thing that makes scholarly activity real in your program is knowing that it's happening and tracking its trajectory, right? Because I really love that last case that Kim talked about where, it's the end of the academic year or it's getting close to the end of residency and either a faculty or a resident is saying, oh, well, I just didn't prioritize that within the time frame, and now we're getting kind of close to the end. So one thing that's important program wide at every level is for every resident, every faculty, and every program director to know what scholarly activity is happening in my program and where are people at different points in their progress. So we're going to talk about 3 potential strategies that programs could use to track scholarly activity within their program. We're going to talk about how you could utilize some existing meeting structures. Kim will talk about a points system that their program uses, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about using a residency management system to help you track this as well. So first, we'll talk about existing meeting structures. And so this is kind of the old way that we did this within my program. So we had some meetings that were baked into our calendar, and we said, well, let's use these meetings or use these points in the academic year to check in with our scholarly activity. So historically, every spring, faculty would complete self-evaluations on their goals and their performance towards those goals. And we do that typically around March. And so one of the questions on that self-evaluation was an update on what current or anticipated scholarly activity the faculty had done for that academic year or planned to do in Q4 of that academic year. Now, one of the problems with that is we really had some missed opportunities for collaboration because I would go around and meet with the faculty individually, and I'd have 2 people who had come up with very similar projects that they had been working on in silos for the entire academic year. And so they had really kind of missed the opportunity to get together and work on that because we just weren't talking about it. Similarly, I would circle back in the summer, which is when our web ads was due, to say, remind me again what scholarly activity you have done through the year so I can record that. And the risk there is I might have a faculty who actually hadn't completed scholarly activity within the academic year. So the potential solution that we came up with is we have now added this as a standing agenda item on our monthly faculty meeting. And so that way everybody knows what current scholarly activity people are working on. It even gives a few minutes if a faculty is kind of stuck on a thorny question within a project that they could very quickly get some brainstorming from some of their peers. And then they know, uh-oh, it's the first Friday of the month and Cole is going to ask me where I'm at on my project. And so maybe it's a little prompt to make a little progress on something they had been stalled on. On the resident side of things, historically, where we were checking in on progress on scholarly activity was biannually with their CCC reviews. Same thing, status update on the current or anticipated activity, same risk, missed opportunities for collaboration. We'd have faculty advisors in the CCC who would say, oh, well, your resident's basically doing the same project my resident is, and why didn't we get them together in the first place? So our solution here was to enlist a residency coordinator and put this as a standing item on the weekly resident meetings. And so they sort of mirror what the faculty are doing, which is, has anybody made any progress on their scholarly activity in the past week? Does anybody have any question they want to toss out? And our chiefs will admit that if it's a busy resident meeting, that maybe that item doesn't always get addressed, but it's on there, everybody's looking at it. And so it kind of keeps it fresh in everybody's mind that this is something they can and should be working towards. We also historically gave quarterly didactics on some principles of scholarship. The goal of that was just sort of to teach some fundamentals of research and research presentation. That was absolutely not nearly enough protected time. And so Kim sort of hit on some tips and tricks already with that, but we decided to dedicate one entire rotation to scholarly activity, and residents could choose whether they wanted to use that in PGY2 or PGY3 family medicine is mostly a 3-year residency at this point. So they could tailor that to when it made sense for them to be doing their scholarly activity project. So now we have a little bit of quarterly protected time. Everybody gets a rotation to focus on this. And the feedback that we're getting from residents is that is improving the quality of their output.
Well, I love that. I think that by baking it in, you do increase that culture of inquiry as well, which is really cool. One of the things that we did to start out with, recognizing that as a new program, scholarly work may seem daunting. And so each resident is required to do a certain number of points. And I'm going to share on my next slide kind of what our points are for and what they get. But they each have to get 8 points. And so we have some residents who really want to do those, outward facing, let me have grand rounds presentations. And those are wonderful, and we love those, and they get the most points. But I have some residents who that is not their jam, but they will love to talk to legislators and talk to others and do op-eds around advocacy for the vulnerable populations that we care for. We have some who really want to help us improve the quality of care that we give. And so we have OB guidelines that we have residents update. Some folks really jazz into that community presentation. How do I take information and apply it in such a way that the community benefits? And then some folks just really love teaching. We actually have one resident who she teaches 1 to 2 minutes at our nurse huddles. Not every day, but many days. And I think she gets a 1/4 of a point or maybe a 1/10 of a point every time she does it, because it's such a short thing. But over the course of 2 years, she's demonstrated probably 50 different topics to our nursing staff, and it makes them feel engaged both in her education and in the care of our patients. So this is sort of the rubric that we use. I know it's really small print, so excuse that, but residents can work on their own, or they can work in a team. And so we kind of divide the points out if it's in a team. But this has been a really useful way to help that culture of we're always trying to improve the knowledge of those around us, including ourselves. And so that's been a really neat model for us. Sarah.
Thank you, Kim. So a third strategy that you could use to track scholarly activity is actually leveraging a residency management system. You could also easily use some sort of office-based tool such as Excel or Word. But if you have new innovations, and I will say I've only seen new innovations, so it's entirely possible that MedHub or some of the other residency management systems have this capacity as well. I can't speak expertly to that, so these screenshots are from new innovations, but you already have a residency management system. You might as well use it to also be tracking your scholarly activity. So in new innovations, for example, if you were to go to the portfolio tab and open scholarly activity forms, there are some templates that you can choose that will pull in. Was this scholarly activity a chapter or textbook publication? Was it an abstract? You can also create your own customized to your program by selecting that new button. But you can create the different categories of scholarship that your program is likely to do. And then, next slide, please, Kim. Thank you. You can actually assign that to a resident or a faculty who's performing a certain project. So you simply create the scholarly activity form. You can apply a description. You can apply an activity date that can either be the current date or it can be the date of anticipated completion or presentation. Next slide. Thank you. And then You log in which residents did this. So for example, we just had our regional research colloquium. And so this is an example of a completed scholarly activity that was done by 3 of our residents and 1 of our faculty who paired on a quality improvement project around counseling patients on the potential value of PSA screening for prostate cancer. It was quite easy to simply log in who the contributors were, so I didn't have to log it for each person. And now we have that recorded in the resident and the faculty's portfolio. So come this summer, when I need to enter that into ADS as the program director, I have it readily available to me in list form, and I'm not trying to track people down to say, remind me again what it is that you did. Next slide. And so that's what that looks like in list form. And so you can create a report that shows what your departmental research is. Now, this happens to be, because our program coordinator and I just entered all of this for our research colloquium, this happens to be a number of completed projects, but you can edit that. So you'll see on the left-hand side, there's an edit button. So for example, if I have an intern who's just starting on their research project, I can put in what it is they are working on with an activity description, and then we can continually go in and edit that to give a little status update as to where they're at and how close they are to completion. The advantage to this, I think, is yes, we have our meeting structures where we can report out verbally what our progress is. But this way, everybody has access in an asynchronous fashion 24/7. So if I have an intern or a faculty who's brainstorming or looking for a project to collaborate on, and it's 2 in the morning because they're on night float, they can just log in and they can see what are people working on and what might I want to be joining in on, or where do I see some gaps that I could be exploring as well. And so our program coordinator will be editing, sort of updating everybody's project once a month. She will time that with when we have our faculty meetings and ask the residents for any updates they have as well. Next slide.
All right.
I think
So-
that's you, Kim.
Yeah, where does your program present its scholarly activity? So here's a whole bunch of different opportunities that our program has done, and looking at our nursing huddle, our interprofessional team huddle, and a regional presentation. This is at the Idaho Academy of Family Docs, and then a webinar presentation as well. So I think there are a lot of different opportunities to really get information out. And so we talked, Sarah just spoke of a program research day or collaborative research day that they've had. Certainly learning collaboratives are a great spot. Journals, hospital grand rounds. Recently, our Idaho Academy of Family Docs put together a grand rounds that is statewide. Which has been really fun to collaborate with other residencies across our state. We have a pretty small state, so it's been really nice to have an opportunity for residents to get other people to listen to their work. Professional conferences for certain, and then thinking about, instruction and maybe some of those more traditional courses. But thinking of kind of out of the box thinking. So what about web pages? What about podcasts, blogs? Thinking about presentations to community organizations. I spoke about that with the colon cancer screening. You can also do presentations to a clinic or hospital group, particularly around the QI work, and then demonstrating leadership in professional organizations. So my boss has been a great mentor to me. His comment is always, if you're going to do something, don't do it once. If you're going to learn about something, don't just present it once. Figure out a way to reduce the amount of work you have to do and reuse your presentation and recycle it in different spaces. So I think that this is really a value add to the scholarly work. So maybe you have for an example, right? Different types of uterine tamponade systems. So what's the differences? How do they work? Why did your hospital choose one over another? And you could present that at a poster in the National Specialty Conference. But then maybe you have a case report where this new device was used and you want to send that out to one of the journals. And then maybe that also inspires a community talk about emergent conditions relating to pregnancy and what does that look like from a community perspective. And I think that's just one example of a whole lot of different opportunities that we can use to sort of use and reuse the scholarly activity that you are generating. Consider pairing faculty and residents into teams to work on the same project, but maybe reporting in different places. And then invite external folks to your research day, making it a regional conference. Super easy to do a hybrid model where you have some people in person, but maybe you've got some folks that are outside of your particular area, but still interested. And that can be a really lovely way to broaden the information and the work that your team has put in to this scholarly space.
And
We
Kim,
did this.
I'll chime in there for.
Oh, please.
Sorry, yeah, I'll chime in on that last one too, which is inviting external stakeholders, particularly if they're in a different location, elevates your research day from a local day, which is fine for residents, to a regional day, which is what your faculty need rather than just local. And so I just wanted to highlight that aspect for the program directors on the call.
Yes, so helpful. We also have done, and I started this in COVID times, but because everything was virtual, we started swapping talks with other programs. So I ended up having our current AFMRD president come and give my residents a talk about crucial conversations because that's something that he's really good at. And then I gave a talk in, I'm in Idaho. I gave a talk to a group in Michigan about post menopausal vaginal bleeding. And their program director gave my team a talk about nutrition. And so it was super fun and just a neat way to get different faces in front of our programs, but it also gave us an opportunity to highlight scholarly activity for each other. So I think that it can be a real win-win to work together in this work. All right, so Sarah, tell us the takeaways.
All right, so what we hope you walk away with is the concept that faculty and residents may engage more with scholarly activity work from the lens of this is quality improvement so that we can improve our delivery of care to patients. This is population health so we can better care for our communities. This is work in teaching and learning, so you can better teach learners. And there is a cohort of residents and faculty who are going to respond much more enthusiastically to that framework than they are to the idea of traditional or biomedical research. And that's important because early engagement and routine tracking will not only increase the frequency of scholarly activity that is occurring within your program, but also the quality of the scholarly activity that is occurring within your program. It will make it much more meaningful. And then networking and professional development can help turn what residents and faculty are already doing on a regular basis into meaningful patient or community-based scholarly activity. So really just asking people to sit down and self-reflect on what do they love or what do they do routinely anyway, and how can we transform that into some sort of leadership, case report, quality improvement project to make it fulfill those scholarly activity requirements that we have to do.
Grant. And here's just a list of our references. So if folks want to see kind of some papers that have talked about these kinds of strategies before. And then we'll move into questions. I am not seeing a lot of questions in the chat, but maybe there are some in the Q&A, Katina.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Hopefully folks are thinking of their questions. There is one question in the Q&A that Michelle asked. Have you had to generate monetary ROI models to show how administrative support, dedicated resident and faculty time, etc., are cost neutral or revenue generating?
I mean, I think that was generated from one of my slides around faculty administrative time. We have not had to do an ROI with that. I think, you know, certainly that we could come to that. I think it is a tricky number to get to. But as long as we are moving more and more to value-based care, which who knows what the future will bring. We think it's the right way to provide care. So I think we have been successful in getting people some carved out time to do registry management and population health, as well as quality improvement, particularly any of our programs that are supported by HRSA. There's a plethora of HRSA quality metrics that must be calculated every year. So I don't think it's too hard to encourage that faculty time. I don't know, Sarah, if you had to do that.
Yeah, I've had to do a version of this. So I'm in a community-based program, so I don't need to do like a formal university department sort of ROI or you know, budget analysis to show this, but I do have to do it for my DOI and then also for our clinic system to justify faculty time away from clinic and hospital. And so I actually have to do this annually. And so one of the sort of value adds that we have shown for that is a number of the quality improvement projects that we develop because, again, we're family medicine. The American Board of Family Medicine does require all of its diplomates to have a quality improvement activity within each certain amount of time each year for maintenance of certification. Our residency program is designated as a program that can generate its own QI ideas and then develop them into projects. And then our clinic can latch onto that and can develop it across the health system for other diplomates to use. And so we have justified that in the past by saying, because our faculty are going through the development process system, some administrative staff time, because they would otherwise need to be doing that. So again, sometimes if you sort of think creatively, or if you have some resources for how you can deploy what you're doing within your program in a way that benefits your sponsoring institution in some way, that may be a way to generate.
Thanks. There's another question that just popped up in the Q&A. It reads, thank you for the practical and relevant information that you shared. I liked the idea of a faculty scholarly activity hero. Is this an additional responsibility for this faculty member? Is there a stipend involved? And also they're wondering if there's a possibility to have a research mentor instead of just one faculty scholarly hero.
Yeah, so for us, that is considered part of her job description, and it's a place of particular interest for her. I have the oversight of my faculty's contracts, and so I can I have the luxury of being able to add a small stipend to her pay in order to support her lift in that world. But then I would say all of the faculty are really encouraged, supported to do scholarly work. So it's not just It's not just one faculty who does it. She's the one who kind of keeps track of the points, but I would say her and I both are the folks that send out the, hey, they just called for poster at FMX. Does anybody want to go to FMX this year? Which is our big scientific assembly for family medicine. Gee, they just called for posters at the Medical Association statewide meeting. Does anyone want to go to that? Are you going to take a poster? So I think it's yes, one person that sort of oversees the work, but it's got to come from everyone. All the faculty need to do scholarly activity, and so the jazz is in making it exciting for everyone to do.
I'll tag onto that just by saying I don't have a scholarly activity faculty champion. Perhaps I need one. The sort of clarifying comment I'll make to Kim's excellent answer is in our program, every faculty is assigned 1, 2, or 3 residents as their advisees. And so they are expected to be the default research mentor for their advisee. Now, they don't have to be, right? Like if there's a resident who really wants to do a project in sports medicine, for example, but their advisee is one of the OB faculty instead of the sports medicine faculty, they can crosswalk to whoever makes the most sense. But we have found that that's another way to generate that expectation that every faculty will be doing research because your advisee is going to be coming to you with something at some point.
Thank you. We have a question. We've got about 6 minutes for questions. We have a question from an OMS2 who's going to be starting a research scholar year and then moving on to clinical rotations. Do you have any advice for this student in making the most of this opportunity of a scholar year?
That's so exciting. I'm so glad that that student has that opportunity, actually. I think the advice that I would have is enter that year with some potential topic ideas and make that something that really excites you. Because if you end up needing to work with a topic that doesn't excite you, it's going to be a miserable year. Whereas if you find a topic that you're really passionate about, it's going to be a really exciting year. But then also be open to suggestions from whoever your mentor is, because they may see something in you or sort of have an understanding of what's going on with the landscape that may be a better fit for you. So come in with some ideas, but be a little flexible in where you land. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah, Sarah, my answer was exactly the same. Find an area of passion and then find someone that you can communicate really well with to be your mentor, because it really comes down to those two things. I think the energy that you need to get you through that year and really be successful. And then think about all the ways that you can share the information you learn during that year. And don't just make one outcome be the end of your process.
We have a question from Carrie. She asks, how would you recommend a position be structured to support a consortium sponsoring institution that does not own a hospital to support 150 residents in multiple programs for QI and research?
I mean, I can start, Sarah. You're at a bigger institution than me, but I have had a dream of having a PhD research, health science research person in our programs, in our sponsoring institution that could oversee the QI and research of all the residencies that we work with, and really be that kind of hero for everyone and not rely on somebody that gets a teeny tiny stipend to do it in my own program, somebody who has statistics and other opportunities to reach out to IRBs and that sort of thing. So yes, I would love that, but from a bigger space, Sarah, how does your world work?
Yeah, so I will say my knee-jerk reaction to that question was, wow, you probably need more than one person. Probably needs to be more than one position. So I would say sort of the basic position might be a research coordinator. So that person who can be the person who is nudging the residents, be like, hey, what is your project? Hey, have you turned in your IRB application? Hey, I heard back from the IRB for you. What are your next steps? And then sort of checking in. That's sort of the must-have, in my opinion. The nice to have, yeah, I know, FTEs are a problem. Yes. The nice to have component to that would be somebody who also has research-based experience already, particularly a statistician. That seems to be one of the big unmet needs, is somebody who can walk your residents through, well, and faculty too, about, what does their study design need to be, and, how do they, get a sample size for power, and then how are they going to analyze their data afterwards. And so if you only have one FTE for that, you might need to sort of think, what is your higher priority? And then structure the position around that.
Then we have just a couple of minutes for a couple of comments and then one last question. The response was that there's a leadership is only giving one FTE to support this sort of position, and also it's difficult to find the unicorns that can do the QI methodology and support research in the GME space. And our last question, this says, for residents hoping to pursue competitive fellowships, is traditional research with a big R still valued more? If they are at smaller or community-based programs, how can they navigate having less resources in order to do more traditional research? Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think yeah, for me, it's what fellowship are you looking at? I know we had somebody that had pre-written a question around cardiology. I think you have to look at what programs are you interested in becoming a fellow at? What kind of work have they done? Who are the fellows that were chosen the last few years? What have they done? So you kind of get a baseline of what you need to be successful. And then I think search for partners. One of the things that we are fortunate to have in the Northwest is the Washington Practice Research Network that does a lot of practice-based research and really quite traditional types of practice-based research that goes out into communities. And so perhaps one of your local colleges is really doing some of that work, and you can partner in with more traditional research. I think certainly, depending on the type of fellowship, really strong research in QI and practice change can also look very compelling as a candidate. Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. So take what I say with a grain of salt, because I'm not a fellowship director, particularly not of a highly competitive specialty. But I think what directors are going to be looking for is more about the passion and the clarity of thought in your research, and not necessarily the type of research that it is. So if you are passionate about qualitative research or sort of more population-based research, as long as you can articulate that, I think they will hold that equivalent to, research into some sort of biomedical device, for example. Just be prepared to chat about that. And then, yes, I think your second question is actually one of your questions to ask during the interview, is if you are at a smaller or community-based program, is to say, how do you help residents still achieve, or fellows still achieve their research? Who could my external stakeholders be? Who could my partners be? Who is my learning collaborative, etc.?
That was perfect. Thank you so much. And we are just at time. So thank you, Dr. Stutzman and Dr. Cole, for joining us and this great presentation, and for all the questions and, excuse me, folks on the call. If you have any further questions for us at AOGME, don't hesitate to reach out via email, aogme@acom.org. And this concludes our webinar for today. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye.
Rue. Thank you.